So we are now recording. As I said, welcome to our webinar series for 2018. The title of our webinar series is Calming the Storm. As you can see from the slide that we're presenting, the subtitle is Musar Practices for the Heart and Soul in Troubling Times. And all of you have probably received the email, which will continue to go out with each of our webinars running from now until, I believe, June. So we have 5 webinars. These webinars were produced by the Musar Institute with the assistance of Elizabeth Eastman, who's been working very diligently with us to put together this series. So I want to thank her for her help. As I said, this webinar is the first, and it's with Alan Marinis on meditation as Musar practice. I'm going to go to another slide, if you give me just one moment. Just to give you an update of what's going on with the Musar Institute. We have coming up, and registration will open this week for our upcoming retreat, which is going to be in St. Louis, May 6th through 9th. Some of the teachers who will be there are Alan, Avi Fertig, and Cindy Levy. And as you can see from the slide, registration opens sometime this week. So be on the lookout for that email. And there'll be more information with prices and a link to register. These webinars, we do not charge for these webinars, but they are provided to the community as a free program with the support of people like you out there who help to underwrite it. And if you're interested in making a donation to help support this effort, to continue to bring these great teachers to the Musar community, you can go to musarinstitute.org/donate, or just go to our homepage, musarinstitute.org, and you will see a donate button on the right-hand side of the screen. And we appreciate all donations that help us to continue to offer this great webinar series year after year. I think this is our 5th or 6th year of doing free webinars. So having said all that, and having introduced Evan, who is helping me at the controls today, I am going to turn this over to Alan, who is the Dean and founder of the Musar Institute and probably doesn't need much more introduction than that. So I'm going to turn it over to him, and he can introduce himself to everybody. We will leave time at the end of the session for questions and answers, and you will see in your control box for Zoom, there is a Q&A box where you can put questions. There's also a chat room, but try to use the Q&A box. Right now we have, I believe, over 60 people on the call. I see people from all over the country, all over the world. Many of you I know. Those of you who I don't know, welcome. We hope you can continue to be with us throughout the series. So Alan, I'm going to hand it over to you, and we will go from there.
Thank you, Jeff. And thank you, Evan. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, everyone who's come to be with us today. It's a pleasure to be able to bring out some of the teachings within the Musar tradition on meditation. If you've been to any of the webinars that I've done in the past, you might expect to see me in a different location, not a kitchen with a clock over my shoulder, but in fact, I'm not at home. I just want to share this news. I'm in Toronto because my daughter gave birth to a little baby boy 2 weeks ago, and so we've been hanging out in Toronto with a little guy and his 2 older sisters, and that's why I'm in this unusual location. So that was just the location was just an excuse to share the nachas that we have a new grandchild. So I'm sure that that's just a pleasure. And if you have something comparable in your life, you'll know what a pleasure it is. I could go on, but I think we have limited time, and there is a topic. It's so interesting because, you know, there's a saying in Kohelet in Ecclesiastes, Ein chadash tachat hashemesh. There is nothing new under the sun. And we now are experiencing a great upswing in interest in meditation under the title of mindfulness, and you everywhere. And there's nothing new under the sun. The Mussar teachers, and for those of you who don't have such a strong background or fully informed about Mussar, it goes back 1,100 years. We have 1,100 years of teaching tradition in this Mussar world. They have long thought of meditation as being a central part of spiritual work. And so in introducing you to some of the ways in which meditation plays a role in Mussar practice, I'm really just calling on something quite traditional. There is room for innovation, usually in the way the practices are composed. In other words, the frame exists, the frame has been passed down to us, and there's certainly room for developing things within the frame. But we're not talking about creating a new frame. Now, to start us off, I want to remind us that the Mussar tradition has defined for us in two different ways the goal of Mussar practice. One is called Kedusha, which means holiness, and the other one is Shleimut, which means to be whole. It actually works nice in English, holiness and wholeness, but they come from two completely different roots, and in Hebrew, Kedusha and Shleimut. And both of them have sources in the Torah, and they are very deep and profound Jewish concepts about what we're trying to do using the study and the practice of Mussar. We're trying to create a path in our own individual lives that is directed towards these goals of holiness and wholeness. And I mention that because meditation doesn't just exist in a vacuum. In fact, as we go through some meditation techniques, and if you've been practicing meditation in any other context, you might see them as similar. And technically, they may well be similar. But it's like saying a car is a car is a car. That's true. But the journey depends on the destination. So in what makes a lot of what makes Mussar meditation, way we apply Mussar that are more general than just being goals of meditation. And so I needed to remind you, bring into the context that all of this is in the direction of Kedusha and Shleimut, details and the particulars of it. We can lose sight of that, but I needed to put it in the forefront so we at least know that's where we're started. In Hebrew, the word for meditation is hitbonanut, and lehitnen is the reflexive form of the root, which means to understand. You may be familiar with the word bina. Bina is understanding. And lehitbonen is to cause yourself to understand. In the traditional literature, it's being used in different ways. And so I just want to make it really clear that in calling it meditation, this is really a clarification from the root within which I have studied and drawn my teaching in the Jewish world and in the Mussar world in particular. Because the word lehitbonen or hitbonanut can also mean contemplation. And there are many sources in which it is, and even deep thought, just the idea of thinking deeply on something. And you can find sources which that makes a better definition or interpretation of hitbonanut. But I want to interpret it as meditation. What I want to call meditation is differentiated from contemplation. And that will become clear as we go forward. The actual practice of meditation, and we will do some along the way as I introduce various concepts, involves entering a period of silence and directing the mind to pay attention with concentration to a simple, singular inner focus. And that inner focus can be the breath, watching the flow of the breath, or inner light, or a single image, or even a word. But the point is that the mind is meant to hold to this particular object. So we assign to ourselves, that's why lehit bonen it's a reflexive form, you do it to yourself, to hold this simple, single object in mind, just as a practice of concentration and clarification. Now, I just distinguish that from contemplation. Contemplation actually uses the cognitive function. You're thinking about something in a very contemplative way, whereas meditation sidesteps cognition. Meditation is an inner process using the mind, but not to cogitate, not to think words and concepts, but actually to sidestep that process which you're so familiar with of the inner dialogue. In a Musar context, I mentioned at the beginning that mindfulness is so popular these days. In a Musar context, there are key differences between what we call, or what I hear is called mindfulness, and the Musar context in which we are also paying attention. It has to do with contextualization. Just very briefly, the notion of mindfulness is presented as a spiritual practice. In the Musar context, meditation is a component of a spiritual practice, not its own practice as itself. And the other thing is, in mindfulness, it is divorced from an ethical system. The point is to develop clarity of mind and single-pointedness, an ability to pay attention, and so on. But there is no given ethical context in which to use that capacity that you're developing. This is entirely different from the Musar approach. The Musar approach brings with it, and actually has one of its sort of sub-goals, to help us become ethical in the way that the Torah and the Jewish tradition teaches us. So in being more, if you use the word mindful, it is mindful within a construct that guides us in terms of good and bad and right and wrong. And that's very different from what we see in the contemporary world, where mindfulness is just a technique. It's a disembodied technique. In terms of Musar, in terms of meditation practice, I just want to mention briefly the kinds of things that a person can use as the object of meditation. I'll mention them briefly, and then we'll do one as our first brief exercise to experience this. It's possible to, and I invite you at any time as I'm describing things, to close your eyes and actually experience the kinds of things I'm describing. To use as object of meditation your own inner bodily sensations. So you can close your eyes and tune in to whatever's happening in your body, just experiencing the sensations themselves: hunger, comfort, discomfort, warmth, coldness, whatever it is. That's not, here's a good example of where it's not the same as contemplation. It's not trying to figure anything out and not trying to think deeply on it, but just experience what you're already experiencing, but holding the mind, giving the mind the assignment of paying attention to that with concentration. Another very common form of object to attach the awareness to is the breath. Same thing. If you watch the breath going in and out in and out, just using the power of inner awareness for that, then again, you're sidestepping any kind of inner dialogue. And what you're doing is finding an object within that is familiar, that does not require or invite discursive thought, figuring things out using language in your own mind, but brings you into contact with something that is beneath or behind or beside that process, a different faculty of your inner awareness, not attached to thought in the sort of cogitation sense. Within the Jewish world, you find a lot of meditation focused on a single word or an object. So a single word, very common, different, translating a word like Shema. The word Shema means listen. So if you close your eyes and you instruct your inner awareness to hold within it, to focus on, in my language, say, fill the screen of consciousness with the experience of listening, and it helps in a way to shut off the thought process, the flow of words, to have a single word in mind, and that single word I'm suggesting be the word Shema. So you open your ears, you just be there as a passive listener. Listening is really a passive activity. You can't bear down on listening. Either you're listening or you're not. It's either you're open or you're not. And this is also an object of meditation practice. And in fact, there's a very good source in the Mussar world, the book Cheshbon HaNefesh, which was published, I think, in 1811 by Rabbi Menachem Mendeleev, and talks about two young men who learned to hold their mind on one quality, one thought, one inner focus like this for an hour. We won't do that. We don't have that much time. But it's interesting that as far back as 1811, we find sources within the Musar tradition describing this practice just as that. And then as another example, and this one I'm going to invite you to do for a few minutes, is to close your eyes and bring that quality of awareness, which you immediately experience heightened by closing your eyes. That shuts out the world of perception, so you're more isolated, more concentrated in your inner world. You become aware of this scintillating inner presence that is you, this live awareness. And you can experience that live awareness as an inner radiance. It's not a stretch. When your eyes are closed and cut off from perception, but you're awake, there is just an experience of inner radiance. So in meditation practice, we kind of bring the mind to a point of stillness just by inviting, not by forcing or binding, no gritting of teeth, but just you as a conscious being direct that inner capacity, which is under your control, just to be filled with the experience of inner light, unmoving, undisturbed, resting. So imagine we extended that a little bit. And in typical Musar practice, what one would do is pick an object, the inner light, a word, breath, sensations, could be something else, that has no real heavy weight to it. There's no real baggage attached to it. It's just an inner experience. And at the beginning of meditation practice, you would do it for a very short period of time. And then as time went on, and this is what's described in Cheshbon Nefesh, you can keep extending the period that you're able to hold concentration. And even in that brief period that I just went silent, it may well be that you found your mind already beginning to wander. We'll come back to that. There's a positive and a negative in the wandering of the mind, but it is predictable, and the practice involves assigning yourself this concentrated object, and then being aware that maybe your mind does wander, and trying to catch yourself, not follow that distraction off into the distance, but become aware of the distraction as soon as you can. I'll return to that. Now, that is just a very brief description of Musar meditation practice, but it's almost all we need for this session, because it's as simple as that. And I know from teaching now the last 20 years, there is a huge difference between simple and easy. These are not the same things. Simple, tell your mind to pay attention to the image of a period, a dot, hold that. Okay, that's simple. Easy? No, difficult, because the mind wanders. So that's it for the description of practice. And now we'll go into some of the deeper understanding of what we're involved with and how this practice makes sense in a Musar context. In the first instance, what we're doing, and we even were doing it already in that little practice, is cultivating awareness. As if to say, strengthening the capacity for inner awareness, strengthening the muscle, or increasing the light, the number of volts or watts of the inner light bulb. Now, in the Musar tradition, there have been two pillar texts. One was Chovat HaLevavot, Duties of the Heart, published in 1080. And the second one, much more recent, is called Misil Yishar, Path of the Just, published in 1740. 1740 is not exactly recent, but it's more recent than 1080. Moshe Mutzato offers a stepwise progression of midot that you can follow, and that he advises that one follow to proceed towards the goals that we talked about earlier. And the final chapter of his book is on holiness. That's the end. The starting point is the quality that he names as zihirut. Zihirut. And when the word is translated into English, and with good reason, very often it's translated as caution or watchfulness or vigilance. And when you read the chapter, you understand that it makes sense, that is a valid translation of the word zehirut. But it's not the only one that we have from tradition, and there's an old source as well. Rabbi David ben Yehoshua Maimonides, who was, excuse me, the fifth generation after the famous Maimonides, in the same family. So Maimonides, the Rambam, who's a tremendous source of everything in terms of Jewish thought, fifth generation, he pointed out that the word zehirut comes from the Hebrew root zayin hey resh, and the zayin hey resh root has nothing to do directly with caution or watchfulness or vigilance. The root actually means shining or bright. And the same three-letter root shows up in the word Zohar. which is the Kabbalistic core text, which means the title translates as shining. The Zohar, if it's translated in English, is shining. And in the morning prayers, in the traditional prayer book, there's a point at which we talk about Zahare Chama, Zahare, the radiance of the sun. So by translating Zehirut as illumination, rather than the more common caution or watchfulness, what we're getting is an insight into what it takes to become cautious or watchful. What are we talking about? When you say to somebody, watch out, you're telling them, pay attention. If the person's asleep or dull or drunk or whatever may be dulling that inner awareness, that's what interferes with the capacity to be cautious or watchful or vigilant. So what we're really talking about, and this is significant that it comes as the first quality in the ladder that Rabbi Luzzatto puts in front of us, the first step on the path is to cultivate bright inner awareness. And here too, I just return to the idea of, in the Mussar context, meditation helps you to become more aware, and that is the start of the journey, but it is not the whole journey. It is not the whole spiritual practice. It is a crucial and unskippable step, but it is not the whole practice. Much comes later. And so we begin with this quality of Zehirut, which comes from meditation practice. And again, to return to the practice we just did now, understanding it maybe a little bit more deeply, when you close your eyes and you see that inner light, it's not fantasy or imagination, it's actual experience of your capacity to be aware. And if awareness is the first and crucial step on a long journey, then just spending some time focused on awareness and strengthening the capacity just to be aware has a role. It makes sense. The inner radiance that is your gift of awareness, gift that you have received, can be shined more brightly, can be brought up to a higher level of illumination. And that's one of the focuses of this process of meditation. So that's one point. Another point. The process of meditation can have the effect of what I call enlarging the inner vessel. When I give the assignment, or you give yourself the assignment, or another teacher gives you the assignment, to focus your attention on a single object, as described, if you're alive and you're a human being, a normally functioning person, you will experience distraction. I often experience distraction, and part of the practice is to try and avoid that by becoming better at concentrating, but also to become more astute and alert at catching those distractions and pulling yourself back. But the distractions themselves, this ability to become aware of distraction, the things that pull you away, is in fact a very good practice for what we want to have happen in our non-meditating life. In other words, meditation is practice for something that we can use in our real experience. And when you go within and you become, or or you assign yourself that inner focus, and then distractions come, you can see it as developing the capacity to hold what you're doing, accept the distraction, and then move it to the side and return to your point of practice. A good example of applying that, so you'll understand better what I'm talking about meditation itself. The example of
Alan, I
applying
think your audio is
quality, one that plays a very important role in most people's Musar practice. Most people experience themselves as illusions. Is it there now? Can you hear me?
Yes, it was going in and out for a minute there. It may be the Wi-Fi connection, but it's better now, I believe.
It's probably no more than I'm on a wireless connection. That's what I can say. Just tell me if you can hear me now.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, you're breaking.
So maybe I'll go a little bit.
Breaking up a little bit.
Maybe if I go a little bit closer to the microphone, maybe that will help. No,
it's the wireless connection. If you can just maybe move just a little bit the computer.
Actually, I tested it out. This is the best spot in the house.
Okay, thank you.
That's why I'm here, because it's not the most attractive spot in the house, but it's best for this purpose. Okay, let me plow on. And please interrupt me again if there's a problem, and I can just repeat. Okay, very briefly, to recap, what I was saying is that the practice of meditation is the process of opening up a larger inner vessel. And the example I was bringing of that is patience, because the practice of meditation gives you a capacity that can be applied in real experiences, real life. And the word for patience in Hebrew is savlanut. And as some of you will know, if you've read writing of mine or heard me teach this before, savlanut comes from the same root as sevel, which means suffering, but also sabal, which means a porter, a person who carries loads. You, as a patient person, are a person who can bear the load of your own suffering. That's all built into this one word, savlanut. That's what patience is. It is not having complete calmness and equanimity. It means you're suffering. You really are agitated, but you have a large enough inner vessel to handle these experiences you're having, which want to motivate you to do something. There's anger, your impatience, your discomfort, your annoyance at the other person, whatever's holding you up, giving rise to this impatience, the axle to hold those feelings so that they don't overwhelm you and you don't react. Then you still have the ability to do whatever you choose to do in the situation. Meditation practice is direct preparation for these tests because it trains our minds to observe and to be sensitized to and to carry whatever it is without being pulled along by it. So that inner container is big and strong enough to hold the distractions that arise, and that's exactly what we need in real life in order to be able to retain free will in how we respond to situations rather than just being overwhelmed by the stimulus. I've often quoted my own Musar teacher, Rabbi Yechiel Yitzhak Per, who talks about Musar practice in general as being a process that opens up a space between the match and the fuse, as he puts it. Musar practice opens up a space between the match and the fuse. That's exactly an image of what we try and do in meditation practice. trying to hold steady to a single object of mental focus. In comes thoughts of, gee, I wonder what's for lunch, or what am I going to do after this session, or I'm uncomfortable, it's hot in here. I'm remembering a painful incident that happened this morning. That's it. You be my guest, fill in the blank. We have to be able to be large enough inwardly to hold that feeling, not be reactive to it, hold it, witness it, and then return to our task. Being patient in the supermarket lineup, or on the freeway, or with our children or grandchildren, or partner, or whoever it is exactly the same process. So the act of being inwardly aware opens up that larger vessel. Another thing I'll just mention briefly that you see a lot in the Musar literature is the notion that in dealing with very strong emotions, and very often what comes at us as distractions in meditation can be strong. It can be anger, it can be envy, it can be lust, it can be worry. The instruction we get from many Musar teachers going back centuries is the way to deal with strong inner emotions is to distance yourself, they say. Distance yourself from anger. That's a quote from the Ramban, Nachmanides. He says, distance yourself from anger. He cannot mean distance yourself from angry people. In other words, stay away from those angry people, then you'll be calm. It's not true, because the biggest issue with anger is our own anger, not somebody else's anger. And when it has to do with our own inner anger, he can't be saying, don't get angry. Distance from anger can't mean just don't get angry, because we know that the one quality that Moshe was held very responsible for, and actually was the thing that caused him not to be admitted to the promised land, was in fact anger. So if Moses was angry and is recorded and reported to us as having had anger, I expect to have anger. And that's exactly what the Musar teachers tell us. We can expect to get angry. It is not a helpful thing to be told, don't get angry, because it's not feasible. We will get angry. So what does it mean to distance yourself from anger? It means to have that large inner space within which anger can happen and you're not attached to it. It doesn't become you. The anger does not become you. That inner awareness is somehow still separated from the experience of that strong emotion, which could be anger, it could be envy, it could be worry, it could be lust, whatever is a strong feeling or thought, pain. To be able to retain awareness is opening up the space between the match and the fuse, distancing yourself. The match is still there. It's still lit. It's still hot. But your consciousness is not making itself available to be caught up in the conflagration, to be set aflame in the way that anger can do it to us. That's the opening of the space between the match and the fuse. And meditation is practice for that. We apply it in real life situations, but it's practice. I want to mention one other thing, and then a thing which is so distinctive to the Musar practice of meditation. In a Jewish context, in a Musar context, Jewish spiritual context, we see ourselves as souls. That's the primary definition of a human being, is that you and I and everybody we meet and know and everybody who ever was and will be is, in their core nature, a neshama, a holy soul. That's our primary nature. When you meditate, you're entering an inner space for a period of time that is beyond words, beyond concepts, beyond identity, beyond name, beyond profession. You're entering space of bare awareness. And that bare awareness, that's the ideal, that's what's happening. Practice of holding in focus just that limited object. The object is really largely irrelevant. It's just a hook to hang your hat on, or a hook to hang your mind on. But what you're really experiencing is just being there. And it has all those other things that are the accretions, the superficial shells of our humanity, move aside, fall down, settle. What's left is a direct taste of profound soul nature. It's not a full experiencing of the neshama. That we actually can't do. It's like, as long as we're human, we can't sidestep our own human experience so much as to be just directly in contact with neshama, with as if everything doesn't exist. It still exists. It's still part of the package. But we can have a sense of our profound beingness. And that's the doorway to the soul, because the other stuff that's in the way of that doorway prevents us from even seeing into the territory of the soul. So stripping away and having experience of pure awareness and beingness is, in a sense, an introduction to and practice in connecting to neshama nature. So let's just, again, return just for a few moments. Settle. I'm talking to myself and you. Settle. Again, bring the focus to the capacity for inner awareness, just that inner experience of luminosity. And as your screen of awareness is just filled with that radiance, in a very still, unprogressing way, it's just in the moment, radiant in the moment. That's a taste of soul nature. That's a taste, a glimpse, a view behind the words, behind the identity, more fundamental than conscious thought, more fundamental than ideas, more fundamental than any construct that we put together of ourselves. So, I mentioned them to go forward on a spiritual journey. Vessel, which is a large vessel, like contain your experience. And in containing your experience, opening up, and once you become, as you develop more capacity, more ability to just be there in awareness, how that gives you a glimpse and a taste of your soul nature, which Jewish teaching tells us is fundamental. You can see the benefits of it. It doesn't necessarily have so much of a direct Mussar component. And here's where meditation does give you next thing I want to talk about is where it's directly related to the Mussar process. You know that most of our effort goes into tikkun midot, to improving or growing in certain inner qualities which have, in each of us uniquely have the capacity to grow. So if you're impatient, you have much more capacity to grow in patience. If you're miserly, generosity. If you're arrogant, you have potential in humility. So you work on these individual inner traits. Now, when we were just doing meditations, very brief meditations along the course of this webinar, and I drew your attention to the fact of distraction, and if we were doing a longer session, I would redo it so we'd again have another opportunity. But whatever distracts you is uniquely yours. In other words, what distracts you will not distract the other person sitting beside you. They have their own distractions. One person is distracted by food or desire or lust. One person is distracted by worry. As soon as they close their eyes, up come all the demons of worry that are plaguing them. Confession time, true confession time. What distracts me is planning. I am so familiar with this already that I know it and I don't get caught in it so much anymore, but that's where I'm vulnerable. Close my eyes, bring myself to a single focus, assign my inner consciousness to stay in that place of stillness and radiance, and up comes, what am I doing later today? As soon as this is over, where am I going to go? What do I have to do next? What about tomorrow? Do I have to plan anything? Do I have to sign it? Like, off I go planning. Now, in most meditation practices that I've ever paid attention, or that I've learned about or heard about, distractions are considered to be like dust on the floor. They're just like impediments. They're just things that show up that you really want to clear away. They're like smudges on the window. You just want to clear the window so it's clear for looking through. In a meditation session, a Mussar meditation session, we do exactly the same thing. When a distraction comes up, become aware of it as quickly as you can, and draw your mind back to the object of meditation, refresh your concentration. After the session, it is very important to look at what it was that distracted you. The message of the distraction is a message uniquely to you about which midot are being used or being called on to draw you away from your intended purpose. There's a notion in the Jewish world of kavanat halev, the intention of the heart. You set yourself, not just in meditation or prayer, in life itself, certain things you intend, and then something pulls you off. Distraction here, obstacle there, impediment there. What is it? Inwardly. I'm not talking about outward obstacles, but you want to do something and up comes laziness. You want to do something and up comes impatience. You want to do something, well, the very same qualities that will distract you in meditation are the ones that work in your life to distract you from being the human being you have the intention to be and you have the potential to be, and that from a Jewish point of view you have the obligation to be. It teaches you what distracts you. So, just to return to my true confessions, if I find planning showing up when I'm not telling myself to plan, what that indicates as a midah, a quality I've learned, took me a long time to practice that it's a lack of trust. I'm so busy planning because I don't trust, I don't have enough bitachon that what's going to come next is going to be then. I can be wholly present in both senses in the moment, because the future will take care of itself with bitachon, with trust. Instead, I become the master planner. I become the director of the show. And I have learned to watching my distractions that that's true not only in my meditation, it's true in my life. So specifically in the Mussar context, we can look on distractions as a gift, not just failure. You know, in a sense, it's like the failure. I failed to keep concentrated. No, in a sense, it is a lesson to us about how our mind works and what works to distract us. I want to say one last thing, and then I see there's a few questions, and I'll leave at least 5-10 minutes to go over that. It's a Jewish principle, a primary Jewish principle, that Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, that God is one. And if we're not one, if we are fragmented, if we are scattered, if we are all over the map, how can we know oneness? How can we be prepared for any kind of knowledge or even encounter with the one if we are several? And one of the great Musar teachers, the Alter of Novardok, Rabbi Yosef Yotzl Horowitz, talks about Pizur HaNefesh, the scattering of the Nefesh soul. And that is the ordinary way most of us live. We're like scattered souls. We're, you know, and he was writing in the late 19th, early 20th century. I don't think that any generation before ours has developed the capacity to be scattered. And, you know, we almost make a virtue of it. We call it multitasking, but it's all pizur hanefesh. It's all a scattered soul. Look at it through people's screen addictions, which are becoming much more prominently identified as an issue these days. Flash, 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 this, that, intercrossing. And the practice of meditation is the practice of self-unification. That same process of holding the mind on one object is the process of creating inner unity. That inner unity is preparation for being able to look for the unity in the other, the oneness in the divine that can be known through any circumstances, the possibility of grace, the possibility of a moment breaking open into connectivity. But as for preparing ourselves to make it more likely, possible, feasible, to connect to the one above, our unity is our task. We're handed the capacity to develop more oneness in ourselves, and that oneness in ourselves is the best preparation we can do. It's no guarantee. It's the best preparation we can do for being ready to connect with the other, capital O. And since I began with Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, I'll end with him, because he points out in his chapter on holiness, and I don't have the exact words here, but he talks about the beginning is labor and the end reward. The beginning is effort and the end is a gift. That applies to meditation. We can make an effort to create oneness in ourselves and to unify this pizur hanefesh, this scattered inner experience. That doesn't guarantee that what will come out at the end is what we're hoping or having as the highest aspiration, say connection to God. It's not a simple formula. But if we don't do the preparation, it becomes much less likely that we will receive the gift if, in fact, a gift is coming our way. So that is an introduction to Mussar meditation. As you can see, the practice is very simple. It's all the same practice, repetitively over a period of days and time. And it makes sense in the context of Mussar to develop that concentration, that oneness, that unification, to be aware of the distractions that are your curriculum. That is what's on your spiritual curriculum, to develop that larger inner vessel, to be more aware. All of it fits with what's involved in the work and the practice and the pathway of Mussar. So that's a really brief overview of a complex subject. So now I'm opening up the Q&A, and I don't know how much I'll be able to answer. Okay, one question here is asking me for more Mussar sources on meditation. There are many. I can't give them verbally here, but the person who asked that question, who is known to me and me to that person, can contact me offline and I will follow up. Oh, so then a question: what is difference between meditation as in the Shema and prayers in the Siddur? I'd say there's a major difference. Meditation on the Shema is not on the whole phrase of the Shema, but just on picking out that one word, listen, because it creates the right inner experience of, in a sense, passivity. This is not something where you grind down. It's not effortful. It's more like opening to, in the way you open to listen, and holding that single word Shema, and the attitude is frozen in the moment. It is stepping outside of the progression. As opposed to prayer, you go through a progression and the ideas matter, not just the experience of that that's being pointed to by that one word. So it's quite different. And somebody asks, what's the continuum for patience? Again, Alan at mussarinstitute.org. I'm happy to answer that specific question. Just email me. Somebody asks, could you define or describe radiance as far as meditation goes? I would say no. I would say the point about radiance is to forget the word, forget the definition, to close your eyes and to see if there's light there. You know, call it radiance, call it brilliance, call it illumination, call it light, call it whatever you will. It's not about describing or defining. It's about closing your eyes and experiencing. Somebody asked, how can we visualize our inner light? I have a very clear answer, and since that's the last question, I'll close with that, which is close your eyes. That's my answer. That's how you visualize your inner light. It's not a visualization. It's a direct experience. And the Mussar teachers, and this is a phenomenal thing about, especially the 19th century teachers in the Mussar movement, were very clear that what is transformative in human experience is experience itself, not concept, not idea, not definition. And so the experience of closing your eyes and experiencing what's there, which has no words, no definition, no description, just the awareness itself. The awareness is an illumination. And with that, I will thank you for your patience in allowing me to explore a fairly large and complex subject in a short time. And I hope it was of value to you. And as I said, if you have questions, please follow up with me, and we'll see what we can do about continuing the journey together. I thank you and wish you well.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you everybody for being on. There were a few people that put in a few questions in the chat room, but unfortunately we are out of time. But as Alan said, please email him at alan@mussarinstitute.org. And he can answer you that way through the email. I do want to again thank Alan, and I want to thank Evan for being on. I want to thank Elizabeth for putting these webinars together with us. I do want to again, before we go off, do a couple of reminders. So I am going to, hopefully everybody can see my screen now. Oh, there we go. So if you have an appetite for more Musar and are new to Musar, you may want to consider registering for our introductory course, A Taste of Musar. There are now 2 ways to do that course. This is a fairly new thing. One is you can do it individually online and receive the lessons via email. We're also setting up groups that will meet by Zoom, just like this, but you'll be able to see each other and interact with each other. So we're setting up distance groups to do Taste of Musar. Also, I'll mention again the practice retreat coming up in St. Louis in May. An email will be going out this week to register for that. Also, as I said, these webinars are offered for free because of the generous support of people like you and all the people who help to make TMI better by contributing. So if you're interested, we appreciate your financial support because that is necessary in order to do these programs. And finally, just a big thank you to everybody for joining us today. Our next webinar will be Sunday, February 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern, just like this one, visualization and contemplation. So you'll see how that might be different than what Alan talked about today in terms of meditation. And that's with Chasya Uriel Steinbauer, who I know a number of you have studied with in the past. She is in New York. So with that, I will thank everybody, wish everybody a good rest of the day. Alan, thank you for your presentation today, and see everyone in February at our next webinar, and have a joyful Tu B'Shvat this week.